Good afternoon and happy Friday. I am Sibu Fael, and this is Ask a Mom, Operator Syndrome, Mental Health, and what is really killing the kids. We're going to have a discussion about space and technology, workers' rights, and the cost of cognitive warfare. This is a daily lunch and learn that happens around lunchtime, hence the name, um, where either you are invited or you come across the link for our live showing. It is the first part of a OSINT Capture the Flag that I put together to learn and improve your open source and research skills. Yesterday, we left off talking about ethical social engineering and this beautiful picture of the US system. So that's where we're going to pick up today. What I was talking about with this particular picture was about how when you look at the formation documentation of the United States system, it really comes down to the, three branches of government. However, those can also get broken down in even more detail from there, encompassing everything the United States knows about human knowledge in the universe and how all of those various systems work together or don't work together, and becomes a argument of either who's the smartest, who's the loudest, who can prove their particular theory. But it all comes down to that process of learning and learning what topics. So governance is, in this particular image, I put the president as the smartest in parentheses US born individual. Because it is assumed that the president has access to all of the information that the United States system has. So they're going to be the most apt individual to make a decision. Now, at this moment in time, yesterday I talked a little bit about where I personally stand on politics, but we're not talking politics on this episode. That's going to be for another day. So, all of that, the US system, we're going to move on to our next slide and start there. So, today we're talking about how do we learn and grow? And it really comes down to the different processes, and every person and learner is going to be different on whether you learn by orally, listen, oral teaching and you listen, whether you are learning through reading or textiles or actually working out the problems and getting the hands-on experience. All of these help with various levels of learning, but at least, where we are at with our current education system, it starts with reading a book. And again, we could go into who wrote the book. What is the book about? all of that. But at this particular juncture, we are looking at just absorbing the information. So, book is given, we sit and read said book, absorb the information. That becomes the analyzing portion, where we spend time challenging, or at least we should spend time challenging the things that we read and look for ways to learn and grow on that particular topic. It's the critical thinking element that comes into being able to learn and grow, because when you learn and grow, you have to be able to accept the fact that one, you might not know everything, and two, you might not be the smartest person in the room. So if you don't know everything, and there very well could be someone in the room that is smarter than you, when it comes to the moment of challenging and discussing whatever content it was we're learning about that day, there needs to be that dialogue to allow all the voices in the room to talk through problems. And that also comes to realizing how different people in the room may learn. There are, when you talk about the difference between extroverted and introverted people, you have a lot of the introverted individuals who when you go into a classroom, it's really easy to spot them first because they're the ones who are lining the walls, where the extroverted individuals are the ones who are coming straight in the room and sitting up front. That was me. I would come in the room, find my seat, usually either in the front or next to someone that I knew was in that class with me. And there was that time to challenge where I would be rather vocal on my own opinions and thoughts. But realizing, and that was something that I personally had to learn, was that even though I have this thirst to learn and the knowledge and ability to pick apart all of this information, I needed to learn how to just sit in the quiet and allow other individuals to start processing information, because all of us process information at different rates. And so, as we continue to go through the process of learning, of reading and challenging and looking for all of these ways to grow, we see this beautiful world unfold. It is the world of STEAM. And I think when we go into technology and talking about the we'll go into video games and all sorts of fun stuff with that. The Steam engine, and if you're not familiar with video games, it's a giant marketplace to buy and sell games, mostly for PCs. But the Steam engine is that science, technology, engineering, art, and math that all come together so we can see both ourselves and the world from different perspectives and begin to pick apart the story from multiple angles. So, as we are reading and analyzing and growing, and now we come into this arena where we're able to see the story along with the science and kind of spin it in multiple realms to understand the various algorithms and possibilities that could unfold, we continue to grow and learn about the story of, again, whatever topic it is that we're learning about or reading about, whether it is fiction or nonfiction, because every story, regardless of how good or bad the author is at sharing their opinion, it is also an element of seeing the world through the author's eyes. And then when we come into the reading and analyzing and constantly analyzing these stories and the writers and how all of the authors over time have viewed the world or viewed specific topics about the world, we realize that all of this comes into the writing and keeping of records of everything humanity has done so we can learn from our past mistakes. At least that's what the purpose behind a long-term record would be. So as we're moving into talking about ethical social engineering and this story that unfolds, we realize that each individual person also has this whole footprint of data. And the data that is attached to the person, we often want to say it is not personal data, but as you continue to learn and grow and add pieces of the puzzle to this long list of data, we realize that without saying a name, without why can't I think of the word? Without identifying the individual who the data is about, quite often we can deduce that. And that is how individuals from law enforcement to governments to really anyone who works with data starts to piece together all of this information and creates this entire picture of what this unknown individual could be, could do, could use. And without realizing that, the internet has become this place of anonymity. However, the more information that you're putting out there, the more likely an individual is going to take all of that information and pinpoint it to you. So that way, whether you have a lot of shame or guilt that has been put on you, whether the things that you have done or have not done were malicious, illegal, run the gamut of things, it's very, very easy that as soon as someone knows your entire life story, that they could take your story and begin to manipulate you as an individual or get to the individuals around you who are supposed to be those points of trust. And especially right now, today, as you look at everything that is happening in the world and in specifically the United States, because that is the place that I have lived and grown up and have been influenced by so many different individuals. But at the same point, I have also been influencing individuals because we all have different perspectives. And the whole point is not that we stay the same, but rather we learn together how to grow and how to grow in a manner that is safe and uplifting to those around us. I forget who it was who said it, but there's a quote. And it's that you're the sum of the 5 people you are closest to. And on any given day, I have about that many people that I talk to on a regular basis every day. And of those individuals, 3 of them live in my house with me, where not only are we learning and growing and thinking and speaking and watching all of the various layers of life together, we are also challenging each other to do better. And when you start to challenge other individuals, it can become difficult because no one likes it when their flaws are pointed out. But if we're not willing to allow those individuals who are closest to us be the ones to call out our flaws, then how are we ever going to grow? So, really, that comes down to building these circles of trust. And as I said earlier, all of these pieces of information we throw out and put on the internet. And whether it is behind a paywall of access or it is behind an encryption that is supposed to be strong enough to not be broken, it is still possible to get in, retrieve information, and it's gotten to the point now where they call, you know, hack or I forget what it is. I saw something talking about it today. But no, but thank you for listening, bub. It's the I'm drawing a complete blank on the word, and I hate it when my mind does that. But what it is basically they go in, they get the information. Even though they cannot read it, they're going to decrypt it later once algorithms are fast enough to break that information apart. And you would think that if you have a strong enough password, and I think if you have like 12 different characters of numbers and letters and special characters, it takes some obscene amount of years to break that information. You start looking at it and asking, what is the point of hack now, decrypt later? What good is that information going to be? But then when you realize that all of this information turns into this loop of financing, and the individual with the most information and the most pinpoints to understand what is happening in the world at any given time and predict what is going to happen within the future, you quickly realize why it matters to hack now and decrypt later. So then you got to ask yourself, okay, well, who has access to my information and what information do they have access to? And now we have all of the social media, and I would call social media a daily account of things that are happening. And quite often, the daily account of things that are happening, they help to form patterns. However, they don't necessarily have life-changing, world-changing information that's happening. You think about it this way as the foodies who take pictures of their meals and what information can be taken from that. But as technology continues to increase and we start having these various algorithms, and one of the fitness apps that I use for tracking the meals that I eat, so that way I can make sure that one, I'm eating, because when you have ADHD, it's very easy to get lost and just forget to eat because those particular triggers in your brain just don't go off. And all of a sudden you start having a headache and realize that, you know, why do I have a headache? Oh, yeah, I haven't eaten in 8 hours. Or as one of the individuals within my circles eat like 3 granola bars in a day, and that's it. And as you realize those various patterns, you can very much learn how to mitigate some of the various problems in your personal life. However, how does that then echo to other bits of data? And how do each rung of the circle affect the other? So in this particular target picture, I say not everyone needs to know every detail. And needs to know is so, it's so important for everyone to understand, not just individuals who hear the term needs to know and automatically thinks of classifications and classified information and holding the national security elements to ensure their security, but needs to know is also a matter of your own personal security, making sure that as I sit here and I share my story and essentially make my private life public to help others to understand how different minds work and different experiences can affect a lot of different people without even realizing it. It all goes back to, what information do you really need to know? Again, as a mom, and as your health fluctuates through the many seasons of life, because, we have all sorts of health issues, whether it's a, annual cold or a major surgery. We have different elements that play into the circle of life to understanding why we are here and how we're supposed to operate together. So, at the very, very center of this circle, we have medical history. And medical history is something that always cracks me up, especially with individuals the older that they get. And I haven't quite figured out if I'm just an individual that people like to tell things, or if this is just something common among older individuals. Because, in all honesty, my entire life, I've thoroughly enjoyed sitting and spending time with the, whichever current oldest generation is here. I remember it really started in middle school because when you do music, or really, I don't know, I'd have to ask my husband if soccer and various sports leagues were a little similar, but one of the ways that we would raise funds for, trips and stuff like that is we would go to elderly so retirement homes, and we would sing and we would do different shows, whether it was at Christmas time, caroling, or what it was. But we would always just kind of spend some time sitting and talking to the older individuals. And I'm not sure what point it is, but they will give you their whole medical history the second you meet them. Like, well, yeah, I was going to do that, but I broke my back in this time, and then I had to do this, and my hip's been replaced 8 times. And they go through this whole long list of what's happened to them. And whether it's a need to have someone hear what they're talking about, whether it is just a trying to help you understand where they're at. But I really don't need to know their medical history as I come in to just sing and read stories to them. However, they are willing to sit there and talk about it. Then you move outside of the ring a little bit more and you have the family history. And family history is very, very interesting to me. And maybe it's because I'm getting older, or I'm not sure exactly at what point in the realm of, hey, I do OSINT is also like genealogy is super fun. But again, it's understanding that story. But who really needs to know who my, great aunt twice removed was? Literally no one. And yet, these pieces of data, these pieces of information are pulled in so that way, as life continues to go on, individuals can see and understand the full picture of an individual. And when you start thinking about it from a holistic standpoint, family history and medical history quite often come into the same orbit of things that affected them are going to affect me down the line. But family history is also the space where there are pain and trauma and little pieces of information that either the individual just doesn't think it's going to make a difference whether you know that or not, or they are just not ready to handle that information. But especially because again, we're talking about the ethical social engineering, which comes into the full circle of life, all the way from birth to death, and how we handle all of these social interactions and pieces of information that are supposed to help us understand the world around us. There are individuals who as they go to the doctor, they don't share that information with individuals who would care. And I say this because in a lot of instances, and I don't know if your family is much like my extended family, or I, I specify my extended family because my hive, which is those individuals who are around me every day and those that I will go to war for. But outside that hive, I have my extended family, and my extended family has a hard time with sharing pieces of information that would be helpful. A great example is my biological father. His biological father, yeah, um, passed away of ALS. And ALS is um, a hereditary disease, but no one shared that information until after my that would have been my grandfather passed away. And that's the story all over the place. And as my hive has worked to identify a toxic relationship versus a relationship that is thriving and growing, and you are mutually feeding each other, because that's what a relationship is supposed to do, is individuals would, you'd find out last minute that someone was in the hospital and you're like, why am I just now finding this out? I would have done X, Y, or Z, or I would have wanted to do X, Y, or Z. And understanding that all of that comes down to your circles of trust and who you trust with what information. But the thing that no one tells you is that you are the one who gets to choose who is in your circle and which rung of said circle they have access to. With that same thing, you have to understand that not everyone gets access to everything. And trust is all about that access of whether or not you trust them. And in the context of information technology and the elements of zero trust, it all plays out when it talks to, or when within the intelligence community and the various classifications and who is allowed access to what information. Again, it all comes down to, do you trust that person with that information? But trust is rarely just given. It is, or at least it should be, earned over time. No matter who you are or what you do, if you are working and understanding what is happening amongst all of the various layers and in all the different rungs of our circles of trust, you have to realize that If I don't need to know that information, I don't need to know that information. And you have to be okay with that. And that's something that not everyone understands and not everyone does well with. So now we're moving down to the rules of ethical social engineering. And these are something that I'm continuing to mold and think about and add to. But they're very, very important, and that's why I want to share them with you. And that is, you cannot have ultimate power and invisibility. And this in particular, talking about just different stories and everything over time, like thinking about that is, if you have power, you are going to be accountable for that power, which is why you don't have invisibility. Now, you do get to choose. If you don't want ultimate power, you are able to live invisibly on, in your own bubble. And the various polls we see with celebrities over time of, respect my privacy as, they're shooting off fireworks everywhere. I don't know if you watch Family Guy, but Family Guy is something we watch in my house quite a bit. And if you do, you probably have the same clip playing in your head as I have playing in mine, where it is Peter and Chris in the front yard talking about how to be famous or important or whatnot. And they end up like flying in a plane and have fireworks on their sunglasses. And anyways, I digress. So you cannot have ultimate power and invisibility, but you do get to choose. 2, death is a natural part of the universe. And this is, again, something that not everyone has a healthy relationship with death. And quite often that healthy relationship is because of a trauma that has been, either seen or unseen within their past, of not fully understanding either the impact or just understanding the fact that they don't know what is next. But everything in the universe has both life and death. And this balance between the two is the pull of energy back and forth, creating all of the just all the beauty in the world, in my opinion. And because death is a natural part of the universe, and our job is to extend the timeline, rule number 3, our job is to extend the timeline, we end up going back and forth between, well, are we going to live forever? Should we live forever? What does living forever even mean? And I don't know about you, but living forever just sounds exhausting. So even those individuals who lean into this idea of wanting to live forever, I cannot relate because it just sounds exhausting and I could use a nap. Um Rule number 4 is ask clarifying questions for understanding. And this was something that I had to learn very quickly is as you start asking questions, other individuals, depending on who they are, very much feel like they're being attacked with your questions. And it's no, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm trying to make sure I understand from your viewpoint, especially when you are trying to work with an individual and they're expecting you to deliver something. Those clarifying questions are important. So, ask clarifying questions for understanding. Rule number 5, no individual human being is God. And the collective force of humanity is kind of what this is one that I'm still molding on how I want to word this and would love some input, but I am going to spend a minute talking about this because I don't know, it's important to me that people in the world understand this. And it's all about this one nation under God. And I remember when I was super in the religious cult of um how did Lindsay put it? So I'm taking, and I know I again ADHD, jump around and you get all sorts of stories. It's super fun. So I'm in a class. I'm learning to become an abortion doula to help individuals manage self abortion from home virtually, as I love to do everything, because that takes my energy and allows me to put it directly into my work and less on, you know, having to move, which when you deal with chronic pain and just other issues, being able to build that bubble and work within that bubble is so helpful. But she talks about the cult of Yahweh. And so that's what we're going to go with in this element, especially because, right now, the various war in the Middle East is raging just as much as it ever has. And the question of God with a big G, there is an importance to that within the context of society. And it is not what everyone thinks about or realizes, but the context is that all humanity is equal. So, this, whatever God is above everyone. Now, the question then becomes okay, who is speaking for God? And that, I believe, is the back and forth of wars of who is the individual speaking for or with God. And as we continue to talk and um, you look or see my writings where I go back and forth between is God here? Is God not there? Like the whole religious element of it. That is the element you have to realize, is that human beings have no idea what it is. So if you think God is talking to you, that is something that needs to be delved into a little bit more. Is it a voice in the back of your head? Is it a conversation with another individual who they're saying that I feel like God is telling me X? And in those cases, you need to be able to pick it apart and have a conversation, because at the very least, in the southern United States, in the cult of Yahweh, it is used as a weapon to manipulate someone into doing something you want them to do. You should do this because I think God is telling me to tell you to do that. Or, you know, whatnot. So, that is the only reason this element of understanding and really discussing God in that aspect is that you, me, my children, your grandma's cousins, best friend, are all equal human beings. And in that, deserve the let's come to the table and have a conversation about what's going on, the respect, dignity, and this comes into how societies will, form into different castes and class. And is it a fight between the right and the left, or is it the vertical war of those who have money and those who don't have money? And I'm better than you because of X. All of that needs to stop if we're going to be able to work together and continue to pull apart the collective human story into understanding what is going on. And that comes into number 6. Personal data is an extension of the human collective. It tells a story, and that data must be protected. This comes everything into AI, and that's definitely one for a conversation for another day. But the information and the individuals that information is attached to, if you are using said data without that without that individual's permission, again, that's a problem. And we have to learn and understand how to operate within this hybrid digital analog world so we can continue to move and learn and grow together. The other thing is that you don't have to know everything. That's number 7. You don't have to know everything. Sometimes there are things you just don't want to know, and it's probably for the best. And I don't know, I think that's a debate in and of itself of, is it better to know or to not know? But I think that that is one of the many things that I have loved about working within some of the spaces that I've worked, because when the spaces were healthy spaces, we were able to have these debates in a healthy manner that was helping all of us grow and not feel like the oxygen was being sucked out of the room. And then our last rule that I have right now is that not all sources should be trusted, but they should be tested. And the all sources should be tested. I mean, I guess it really depends on the source, but if you're willing to test various sources of various individual viewpoints or storylines or whatnot, it helps you to explain, or it helps you to explore what could be and very well could not be, and continues the work of understanding the difference between what's real and what's not. And with that, we wrap up this overview a little bit from yesterday, the rest today, of what it means to be an ethical social engineer and what it takes to look at society from a scientific standpoint in order to understand the story and the viewpoints, because all of those come into play when we're trying to work together to establish something better, because the shit going on right now is not working. So, where do we go from here? And this is where we'll pick up on Monday. So, Monday, about noon, we're going to talk about, there is a call for a national strike on May 1st. What does that mean? How do we, at a national level, be able to manage needs and all the various needs, especially as some individuals have extenuating circumstances and medical conditions and whatnot? How do we help them while supporting this call for a national strike? We're going to talk about parallel systems and the multiverse. So that is going to be our conversation tomorrow. But before I stop the recording and whatnot, I'm going to flip over to a super fun tidbit that I'm going to be talking with some individuals about in a little bit, like 30 minutes to an hour. Cyberspace summer camp. Get ready, teens who are looking for stuff to do this summer. We're putting together a hybrid summer series for teens. Learn how to survive the 80s when growing up meant the possibility of scars and the guarantee of stories. This is going to be focused on the high school age group, going through technology, wellness, work skills, how to make friends, build communities, get off of your computers, your phones, getting outside, possibly getting a scar because you trip on the sidewalk, and bust your face. Who knows? But there'll be a lot more coming with that. And y'all are the first to hear it. So I will talk to everyone on Monday.